Here I am with a gauge swatch. I'm not trying to scare you. In fact, if you're making this project with the intention of donating it, there's no need to make a gauge swatch. You will make a sweater, it will be lovely, and it will fit someone. But if you are trying to make a sweater to fit a certain someone, you want to know that when you follow the instructions for the size that is the one you want to make, that you will end up with a sweater that is actually that size. And the only way that'll happen is if you are matching the gauge that the pattern asks for. Or if you decide not to match the gauge that the pattern asks for, then you need to figure out which size you should make instead of the one that is closest to the measurements of your intended recipient. So the easiest way is to get the gauge, because then you don't have to do all that work, but either one is an option. And I wanted to show you what I do in this type of situation where I'm not going to do a gauge swatch that I will wash or bind off, wash, dry, the whole shebang. I'm just going to use yarn, leave it attached to the ball, and measure it. If it's good enough, I will wind it back onto the ball and just use it. And this is what I usually do. I'll cast on enough stitches to get at least 6 inches. This is an estimate since I'm not quite sure what the gauge would be, but you could go by what would give you 6 inches if you were getting the gauge from the pattern. And then for good luck, because I'm always adding things for good luck, add another 4 or 5 stitches. And then knit up until you've roughly got a square. This is roughly a square, but it's curling in. And I say knit up, that's not true. Stockinette up. So knit one side, purl one side. It is much easier to measure your stitches on stockinette. Sometimes a pattern will ask you to do the gauge in the pattern, and that's always a much harder thing to deal with. We don't need to for this one, so just stockinette, approximately 6 inches square. And that's so that these edges, which are all trying to curl, will not be part of your measurement. You can measure in the center on the clean, undistorted stitches. To make sure that it's as undistorted as possible, I will at this point pull out my needle, so that's not doing anything. And I like these little metal rulers because they're flat and they stay flat. Your measuring tape is made of some kind of fabric, and it might move around a bit. So this I can just kind of hold the swatch in place with this metal ruler. I make sure that my first stitch over here is lined up with the beginning of the 1 inch measurement, and then I just go ahead and I count stitches. Count them right across 4 inches. And you can see perhaps here, I have a partial stitch here, and it is very hard to tell exactly what a partial stitch is. Is it, it could be a half, that would be pretty easy to eyeball. Is it a third or a quarter? Who knows? But if you have counted across 4 inches and divide by 4, you're going to get a much more accurate measurement than if you counted across just 2 inches, and I wouldn't even bother counting across only 1 inch. So that's my way to do a quick gauge swatch without too much bother.